So let's get started without further ado. This is our webinar on branding for aviation companies. This is one that we did once last year and got a lot of requests to do it again. So I'm glad that you guys are here, and if anyone is here who was here last year, we're going to have different questions and a few different examples and things like that, but it will be pretty much the same thing, and of course you're welcome to attend again and see what you think, and it often takes more than once to do this. This actually is a product that ABCI sells, our branding refresh product, for $34.99. So if you happen to be following along in this webinar and you do everything that we suggest and are able to keep up, then it's worth a lot of money to you. So make sure you close all your other windows and pay really close attention, because this is something that is going to make a really big difference in making a small company look larger and making a large company look like you've got your act together. And that makes a whole lot of sense. So this webinar is for you if you are a great company with a great product or a great association, in some of our cases, that should be a household name but isn't yet. If you have a very specific customer set, so we're not talking Coca-Cola or Wells Fargo. Most aviation companies serve a very unique set of people, not the general public. So, that's another thing that we're going to be talking about. And your qualified customers have to have more than just a checkbook and a pulse. So, usually there's something very specific about them. Either they fly a very specific type of aircraft, or they live in a particular area, or they need, your product or service for a very specific reason. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
And it's gonna go through all this in less than an hour. So hang on.
Right. So please do print the handout, which is actually our branding design brief blank document, and you will want a pen, and you're going to want to make sure your cell phone is turned off, and you can make notes as we go along, and I'm sure there's going to be things that you're going to want to do after this session, but as much as you can get down during this session as far as your thoughts and other kinds of things, the better. So go ahead and download that, print it, have it in front of you while we're going through this. That will be really helpful.
To you.
To you, right. Okay. So what we're going to be covering today is your brand and how you use it in your prospecting and advertising, which is your phase one of your marketing system. Your brand and how you can use it to help you close sales, or actually make those transactions more likely and smoother. And then also your brand and how to use it in your customer service process, right? Okay, and we're also going to talk about brand troubleshooting and what could possibly go wrong. So if you do this right, this is what we're expecting as outcomes. You will have a brand that is recognizable and respected by the people that matter the most to you. You'll start relationships with a positive credibility bank account. If you're familiar with the Franklin Covey theory of the credibility or the emotional bank account, you're always either positive or negative, and if you meet somebody for the first time, you're usually a little bit in the negative because they don't know you, right? So, if you start with a more positive bank account on the credibility side, then people begin with a higher level of trust than they would otherwise. You will be the standard against which your competitors compare themselves, which can be a good and a bad thing. And all of that will happen even without spending any more money on advertising. So all of the things that we're talking about today don't necessarily require spending money. You can do these things yourself. It's just a matter of spending time and effort, right?
Some of them.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about our story. Basically, we came into the aviation industry with Fortune 50 marketing skills. We had done marketing for Wells Fargo and Pearson Education and a bunch of other big and respected companies. We also have a lot of high-tech tools and techniques that weren't really being used in the aviation industry at the time. And we also had, especially from John's side, aviation vocabulary and experience. So we're talking like 2008, 2009 when we first got started here. But we didn't have a brand, right?
2006.
2006, exactly. We didn't really have a brand in the aviation industry because we didn't have a reputation. We didn't have anything really to start with other than our brains and
Deciding to
skills
do
and
it.
software and having decided to do it. And we thought, well, this will be great. You know, this is all we need. This will be fantastic because everybody needs what we do, right? That is not exactly what happened, is it?
No.
No. What we got was crickets. Nothing happened. For the first several months and actually even years, things were much more difficult than they should have been because we didn't have an established brand in the aviation industry. It took us a while to build that up. So, you know, and when we say brand, what do we mean by that? We don't mean just a logo. You can't just make a logo and you have a brand, right?
No.
A brand is what comes to mind for your target prospect when someone asks him about your company. So, you know, when somebody would walk up to somebody else in an aviation convention and say, well, what do you think of ABCI? And they've never heard of us. You know, clearly the answer there is nothing. I have no idea. I don't know them from Adam. So, you know, that is a problem. If he doesn't know it or doesn't recognize it or doesn't have an opinion, then you don't have a brand, at least not with that person, right?
Precisely.
Okay, so you can have all of the elements of a brand. You can have a name, you can have a logo, you can have a website, you can have all your fonts and colors and everything else set up, but you don't have a brand. So, you know, we like to say a house is not a home until it's lived in, and a design scheme is not a brand until it has credibility behind it. So your brand is just really shorthand for the reputation that you have, right?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Everybody with me so far? Any questions? Looks like there's some.
See, this is the thing when I talk because I have to moderate the question.
Exactly.
So
It's your turn, John.
So one of them is, how long does it take to, I'm going to say, establish a brand?
Okay. Not very long. The second time somebody runs across your name or the second time someone hears about you, you have a brand, right? I mean, using the definition that we set up. So if someone saw an advertisement for you and then they get a call from you, you already have a reputation with them. So you do have a brand. But I'm going to answer that two ways. That's the short answer. The long answer is that you have to have a certain number of people in the aviation industry, kind of a critical mass of people who have heard about you. And that's what took us so long, was we had to meet a few people who were in the right position and in the right place, who were influential, and you know, who people would ask, you know, who do you know about this? So some of the people who were involved with associations, Brad Harris is involved with the National Aircraft Resale Association, really reputable broker. He was telling people about us. That made a big difference to us early on. A few of our other early clients, Tanis Aircraft Products, you know, other things like that, that associate with a lot of people and that sell to a lot of people. So number one is you need to get some customers that make sense, and then the other thing is the bigger those customers are, or the more reputable those customers are, the better, because their reputation kind of rolls into yours. You know, Dan Kennedy used to give the example of, you know, if you walk through a convention hall with the president's arm over your shoulder, and he's a really reputable guy, then all of a sudden your brand has just gone up, because everybody thinks, oh, well, he thinks he's a great guy. He must not be a terrible person, you know, right, wrong, or otherwise. That happens a lot in the aviation industry.
Exactly.
Cool. Other questions?
Now, yes, one just came in. Should should you wait until you have one or two customers before you invest in branding design?
Good question. You were listening to what I just said. I like that. No. Like we said before, you know, your brand and design and fonts and themes and logo and all of those other things are like an empty house. So, you know, if you invite somebody over to your empty house, that's great, but you at least have a house to invite them over to. right?
Okay.
So, if you have these elements set up ahead of time, then at least you've got something to build on. So, you don't have to do this entire design brief if you don't have any customers yet, but you should at least have some of the basics. We'll talk about logo and colors and other things that are not a lot of money and not a lot of time and energy, but at least then you've got something to build on. So, good?
That's it so far.
It's so far. Okay, cool. So we'll carry on. So branding is visual shorthand. When you see each of these brands, something probably comes to mind, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because you're familiar with
Those
all of these
companies.
brands, except for the one in the lower right-hand corner, right? For most people, that one doesn't really have a connotation yet. That's actually a new company that we've just established.
Lower right-hand corner, that's us.
Okay, just above the lower right-hand corner.
Be specific.
Exactly. Well, that's the branding on our slides, but the one under Hartzell and next to Sporty's Pilot Shop. How's that for specific?
Okay.
Okay. That's a new company. That's Airline Pilot Gateway, and some people have heard of them, some people haven't. But when you think about the difference between these companies, most of them are 20 or more years old. They have hundreds or thousands of customers. People have more than one experience with them, and every time they see that logo, every experience that they've had with them comes to mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about how this works. Brands are earned, not bought, right? So you can go to the best marketing company on the planet, which we like to think is us, and buy a design brief, but it still doesn't do as much good as it should unless you have put the work behind it. So, if you go to a Cutter Aviation FBO and you have great service and see-friendly people, and you go to a Cutter FBO and you have great service and see-friendly people, and you go to a Cutter FBO in Albuquerque and have the same experience, and you go to the Cutter FBO in San Antonio and you have the same experience, and you go to a Cutter FBO somewhere else and you have great service and friendly people, you have a pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having that pattern, next time you go to a Cutter FBO, what is your expectation?
Great service and friendly people.
Exactly. So you go in with the battle half won, right?
Well, they have you with the battle half won.
Exactly. So you go in and you're expecting great service and friendly people. So you're probably going to have a smile on your face when you walk in the door. You're going to be a whole lot easier to please than if you're walking into an unknown place. You're going to be a lot more likely to refer people. You're going to be a lot more likely to hand them your credit card for gas, all of those things, because you have a pattern of good experiences with that, associated with that brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, what happens when you break that pattern?
This one's good.
Right. I love this cartoon. This is a Dilbert cartoon, but if my numbers are correct, my strategic plan is irrational. Cognitive dissonance takes over. Spoink! Right. You sure are bad with numbers. What was that noise? So when information doesn't match, the default position is usually not in your favor. So whenever somebody has an experience with you that doesn't ring true to that pattern, the reaction is going to be negative rather than positive, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, whenever there are mixed messages, they're going to default to the negative position. So in a sales situation, that's going to be, okay, well, I don't really understand what this person is talking about, so I'm going to get defensive, right? I'm less likely to spend my money if things aren't going the way I expect them to. You've had that happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're probably the best example of that I have ever seen. I've seen the spoink happen in the middle of the sales process or whatever. Okay, so if you have mixed messages, do not enter and enter only, what are you going to do? You're going to default to the negative probably, so you don't know what you're doing, so you're going to go around the block and find another way to make this happen.
Well, actually, I see that and I think, what a bunch of idiots.
Exactly. Okay. So, the bottom line really is that great brand managers are nitpicking control freaks.
And you said that one.
I did. So guess who our brand manager is?
You.
It's you.
Right.
Exactly. Okay. So what can you make consistent when people interact with your company? Um, you know, what can you do that is markedly different from your competitors? Do you have a unique service element? Do you have a unique process or a unique product? It doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to invent something from scratch. So, for example, if you sell insurance, um, you're pretty much tied into what your company will allow and what the regulations will allow. Okay, we get that. But you can make some things different. The Virgin Airlines red patent heel is a really a good example of this consistency. If you go on a Virgin Airlines, especially in Europe, this is a shoe that everybody wears, that all of the flight attendants wear. How they get them to wear these things on flights, I have no idea, but they're looking for a particular type of person that works in a particular type of way, and they're looking for people who are a little upscale and classier than the flight attendants on other airlines, if I can say that, and or at least willing to dress in a way that's more dressed up than other airlines, and that is their pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this slide didn't work the way I expected. Perfect example. You can say, but people love surprises. Not true, right? No, they don't. People like to have their expectations met or have their expectations exceeded. They really value consistency, and those surprises need to fall into very narrow parameters in order to be appreciated, right?
Like exceeding expectations.
Exactly. It's a surprise when you exceed someone's expectations. It's a surprise when you add something that's a little bit extra onto what they're already receiving, but they don't like surprises in the sense that something happened that they weren't expecting. So testimonials become part of your brand. When people say, I had this great experience with this company, or, I bought something from this person and it was great. Those are fantastic, but only as long as they are consistent with your actual experience. I love this picture because it is so inconsistent with the experience of flying on an airline today, right?
Huh.
You compare this to the news yesterday?
Well,
the pictures in the
yeah.
news of people rioting in the airlines and things like that. It's inconsistent. So even if you ran an advertisement that looked like this, people wouldn't believe it because it's not consistent with
Yeah,
their experience.
well, not only that, but there's, yeah, not just the food, but the fact that there's actually leg room.
Right, exactly. Food and room to eat it. Okay, so questions about what a brand is.
Oh, let's see. So if somebody buys from me only once or twice, is it worth investing a lot in my brand? I'm a broker.
Okay, so great. You're a broker, and I totally get that. People are only going to buy from you once or twice. They're not going to buy an airplane every month. So they're not going to have that consistent experience like they did at Qatar. But if they have a consistent experience the 2 times that they buy from you, or even the 1 time that they buy from you, and the time that they refer their colleague to you who also has a similar experience, that is worth something, and that is worth getting those referrals and those testimonials and everything else, because you want people to have a consistent experience. And as a broker, I would bet that 50% or more of your business comes from referrals. Is that correct? You can just type that in the window if you agree. Okay. So most brokers, that's true, that they get most of their business from referrals and word of mouth. So that consistency is really key for you, even if it's consistency when it's not with the same person, right?
I guess the, the key is investing a lot. I don't know what a lot means in his brain, but
Okay.
if you want to grow your business, you need to invest in a brand.
Oh, yeah.
That's just pure, plain and simple.
Absolutely. So, that somebody can refer you and, forward your materials to somebody else, or let I had a great experience with, Great Circle Aviation or Great Circle Aircraft, and then they see something that's a postcard from Great Circle Aircraft. They remember this conversation that they had. The name, the logo, all that stuff helps you rather than hurts you. So yes, it is.
Okay.
That it?
No.
Okay.
There's two-part question. Next.
Two-part question. People are getting complicated.
What about customization? Don't high-end clients want everything to be custom?
Ah, okay. Good question. And you're actually getting a little bit ahead of us, but that is an excellent question. So yes, just like people don't
What do you
really
mean,
like.
yes?
Yes, customization is important, and it's not inconsistent with what we're saying.
Okay.
You don't throw things out and reinvent the wheel every time. So let's say that you're Gulfstream and somebody orders an aircraft from you, but they want it to be very, very custom, and they want custom paint, and they want custom carpet, and they want a club configuration, and they want the Garmin avionics and other kinds of things. I don't even know if that goes in a Gulfstream, but they want these specific options, but they know they're getting a Gulfstream, okay? So there are things that are consistent about your brand. That aircraft is going to look like every other Gulfstream aircraft in some respects, right?
On the outside.
Yeah, and even on the inside, it's going to be a certain dimension of cabin, and there are things that you're not going to change. So if there are things that are consistent about every time somebody has that experience, it makes your customers a lot more comfortable. They're buying it because they want a Gulfstream. And of course they want it to be theirs and they want it to be different from everybody else's, but they're there because they want a Gulfstream. So the branding is deciding what of those things you can and should make consistent for every single customer, right?
Right.
Okay, so your service, your dimensions, your STCs, being in line with different things, all of that stuff is the same for every single customer, regardless of the options they have.
True.
Okay, did that help?
Well, help me. I don't know about
okay.
the questioner.
Right, you can write back in if that didn't answer your question, and we'll watch for those. So, anything else? We good for so far?
Nope.
Okay.
Good.
Wow. Okay. People are pattern recognition machines. When John and I travel internationally, this is sometimes what we see. We don't understand any of this. We have no idea what's going on in this picture. We don't know, what any of these stores sell, except that we can recognize some of the places that sell food.
Right.
Because they have the Coca-Cola sign. So people and pilots, I would say, are even more pattern recognition machines. They look for patterns they process a whole lot of information at any given time. So, that's why your logo and your brand and the visual elements of your brand should be very distinct. And so we'll talk about those things. We're going to talk about visual elements, verbal elements, and customer experience elements with your brand. So first of all, your logo. This is what people think of when they think of brand. They think of, the brand of cattle, and that's actually where the word came from, where you burn a symbol into the side of some poor animal, and then everybody knows it belongs to you. So we're going to talk about the symbols, devices, colors, sets of colors, and fonts. Okay, so logos and visual symbols. Your logo and your visuals should be used on signs, banners, novelties, advertisements, anywhere that people come in contact with your company. You should have some type of logo or some type of visual elements. And you can use your product logo and visuals. So let's say that you are Textron, which is a company, and you have a product, which is the Cessna Skyhawk. That is a product. And so that product has its own logo and visuals. And that is included on your packaging, materials, and promos, right?
Yep.
Okay, and then you can also have personal logo and visuals. You may not have a logo. It may be just a signature. It may be your initials. If you look at like anything from Richard Branson, it's pretty distinctive. He's got a distinctive signature, other kinds of things. He uses the same image or a very similar image on most of his social media profiles and other kinds of things. So this can be on 3 different levels: the company, the product, and personal. And you should do all 3. Depending on how you communicate with people, and you're going to want to prioritize one. So in our case, we prioritize the company logo and visuals because our products aren't all that distinctive, And, you know, I do some personal branding for me. John does almost none because he's not really that much of a public member of our company. But every company does have a rock star who is the salesperson and who really needs to be out there and recognizable. And, you know, people create relationships with people, not necessarily with companies. So all of those things, you should have all three of these to a certain extent, but you're going to prioritize one of them, right?
All customer-facing stuff.
Yes, exactly. So depending on your goals, you're going to set up a logo potentially for your company, your product, or even yourself, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about colors. When you choose the colors that are involved with your company, there's a couple of things that you want to think about. One of them is contrast, right? This is one thing that a lot of companies get wrong. They use two different shades of blue. This happens so much in aviation, it just makes me want to scream. They choose two shades of blue that are not too different from each other, and they do all of their, and all of their competitors are using very similar shades of blue. And all of their branding is done in these shades of blue. And it becomes really, really hard to read, really, really hard to focus on what the differences are between these companies, not very distinct, okay? The other thing is precision. So, you know, if you look at the blues here, 000099 is a little bit different from 3300cc. And I don't know if my pencil is going to work here, but I'm going to try and circle these. Yep, there we go. Actually, it's this one. So those two colors are kind of different from each other, but it's very often that, you know, you'll go to a printer, you'll have two different things done, and you're going to come up with two different shades of blue that are different from each other. So, you know, that kind of muddies the water. So you want to make sure that you've got the numbers set up and use them for everything. And that precision will really help people with that pattern recognition that we talked about earlier. If you look at a Coca-Cola logo, it is always the exact same shade of red. When I worked for Wells Fargo, they actually trademarked two colors that they had mixed by Pantone for themselves so that nobody else would ever use them, right?
I bet, I don't know this, but I bet that the Coca-Cola sign on the 18-wheelers that go screaming across the middle of the night with all lit up with the Coke logo, it's probably the same color.
Exactly. That's absolutely right. So these big brands pay a lot of attention to this, and you can too. That's one of the things that makes a difference between small companies and large companies, and you can look a lot more polished and a lot more pulled together without spending any more money, just simply by picking two colors that you will always, always use and never vary from those, right? Okay, so that's colors. Now let's talk fonts. Most people don't include this in their perception about branding, but it makes a big difference what you write and how people feel when they see it. So which of these is ABCIs, do you think?
I have no idea.
There you go. We actually use these two. And, you know, not these precise fonts, but we, you know, want to use those principles. And so our fonts aren't on here, which is why you didn't recognize them. But the fonts that you use communicate a different emotion and a different idea. So, you know, depending on what you are trying to communicate with your brand, you're going to want to pick colors that connote that, and you're going to want to pick fonts that connote that. So if you're going for a high-end look, which a lot of people are in the aviation industry, you're going to want to go with darker colors with higher contrast between them, and you're going to want to go with fewer colors in your advertising. So, you know, generally speaking, it's not going to look like a circus. It's going to look very, very refined. So you'd probably choose something like this with two darkish colors, you know, that you use in all of your advertising. And that will look very different from somebody that is doing, you know, maybe a recreational brand like a flight school that's teaching children. You know, then you might use something like this and make it a lot more fun. You know, use this in your advertisements for your summer camps. Use colors that have that are far across each other. In the color wheel, you're going to use more reds and yellows. Those kinds of things make a really, really different feel than what we just talked about, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, questions about visual elements. I know this was a really, really fast whirlwind tour of something that usually takes a lot longer. And for a company that we're doing consulting about, we spend a lot of time on this, right? Getting this right.
That and the logo,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't remember how much time I spent on our logo.
Weeks.
Was it?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't get it the way I wanted it, and then once I did, then it was trying to find somebody that could actually produce it that way.
Exactly. So
Okay.
questions about visual elements?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or I'm going to add, or should you have a high-end brand for lower cost products, in this case, lower cost aircraft?
Okay. And I think the person that's asking that question is a flying club, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So you have a high-end flying club, which is very often the case with maybe some older aircraft, or you think high-end like Gulfstream, but you can also have high-end like Mooney and Cirrus and other kinds of things that are single-engine aircraft. So it's not necessarily about the price of the product. It's about the feel that you want to give. So, obviously the higher price your object is, or the higher price your transaction is, um, the more likely you are to go high end. But there's also kids camps that are very, very high end, and they're going to go for a fun theme. So, those don't necessarily tie together. You can do a refined theme for a low end product, and there's nothing in the world wrong with that. A good example of that, and we use Harley a lot as an example, that's kind of a high-end brand with a fun theme and feel, right?
Yeah, they didn't have a real brand for lots of years,
Mm-hmm.
and they hired a lady for 2 years to go out and do research on what the brand should be and develop it for them.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in business school, she actually came in and gave a speech on branding.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite interesting.
But it's interesting because, the ideal customer for Harley is actually a high net worth or ultra high net worth person.
And
Mm-hmm. Lots of doctors and lawyers on Harleys.
yeah, but that wasn't their problem. The problem was that was only a part of their
Mm-hmm.
their people they do. The other part was there were an awful lot of people who barely could afford a Harley.
Yep.
And there were those gangs that weren't really bad gangs. They just got
Wanted
a
to
Harley together.
have that tough image.
Right. So she had a problem.
Right. That's true. Another element of that is history and populism. So, it's a high-end brand that has a Milwaukee, the Midwest history, and, a populist kind of a brand, kind of a everybody's motorcycle kind of a thing. So, even though they're going after high-end individuals, they wanted to have some elements of their brand that were fun. That's why they use the orange, and that's why they use the fonts that they do, right?
Right.
Cool. So that's an interesting case study, and that's something that we should probably talk about individually. So you can schedule in our office hours to talk about your brand and how to communicate that message with colors and fonts in the best way.
Okay. So more questions.
Okay, we're keeping up.
How often should you change your branding or visual elements?
We recommend having a look at it every 3 years. And the reason is because if you look at brands like that have been around for a long time, they do evolve a little bit. They may flatten a shadow here, or do something to adapt to the new technology, load faster on computers, look better on a mobile device, other kinds of things. So they may develop a new version of their logo for different purposes and things. So we recommend touching it up every 3 years or so. And for a lot of our larger companies, we do a complete brand refresh every 3 years and at least look at everything, maybe adapt some fonts and things to new printing processes and things like that.
So that's branding refresh. I'm going to combine two questions here.
Okay.
One says, what are the ramifications of rebranding?
Ah, okay.
and why and when should you do it. With another one, which they got an old logo, and some of the younger members think it's out of date. So how do you know when to make a move, and how do you do all that?
Okay, right. There are pros and cons to, we call it brand equity. When you have a brand that's existed over time, there are people that recognize it and, have an association with it, either good or bad. So if you have, the two reasons for a rebrand would be, number one, something bad happened, and you really want to communicate that you've made a big difference in the company. You maybe changed a name, you want to change a logo, you want to communicate that difference. So in that case, you want to get rid of some luggage or baggage, some bad brand equity, in which case refreshing your brand at that time is a really good thing. If it's just been a long time and maybe, like a lot of sports teams have a logo that maybe isn't going over well with the board or with the current student body or whatever, you may want to refresh that brand and figure out, and this really is a case of going through what are the pros and cons of your brand. What do people love about it? What do people hate about it? What can you keep and what can you get rid of? And you want to keep as much as you can of the colors, the fonts, the visual elements, the lines, the curves, things that are familiar to people, so that it's going to look familiar to your old customers while appealing to your new ones. So, that's not a very specific answer. But once again, let's talk in your office hours if you're one of our customers, and I think one of those people is and one of those people isn't. So if you are one of our customers, let's talk about it in your office hours, and let's do a pros and cons and see what we can keep and what we can ditch and redo, okay?
And so how do you deal with changing, if you think the brand needs to be changed, and your company is such that some are for it, some are against it? I mean, obviously, if you're in charge, you can say it doesn't matter, we're going to do that. But how do you keep everybody happy? Or can you?
Right.
And then what if you decide no, why? And if you decide yes, why?
Okay. That's a very complicated question, and
see how I am?
I know. You're not making this easy, John. No, that is a very complicated question, and I totally understand. It is impossible to make everybody happy. So if the most important thing, and once again, this comes back to what is your brand communicating, and if the most important thing about your brand is its history, then you can't throw that out, right? If the most important thing about your brand is growth and innovation and appealing to new members and things like that, then you're going to have to make some changes. It's very possible that you're going to be in a situation where you're going to have to upset some of your older members, and then you're going to have to come, or some of your older customers, and you're going to have to come to the conclusion of, in some cases, it's a financial decision of, do we make more money from our newer customers or from our older customers? And how long is this brand sustainable if we don't get any new customers? And that's really a question that we'd have to look at the whole company and the history and the financials and everything else, and your own intentions of, how willing are you to do this? In some cases, we've had people retire, sell their company to somebody else who starts a new brand entirely because they're not willing to compromise. And that's fine too. That's a decision you can make, right?
Yes. One more, a two-part question.
Okay.
I love two-part questions.
Okay.
So what are the best sources for graphic design and the creative aspect of logos?
Okay.
And then what are budget guidelines for logos?
Okay. Logos. What I would suggest, first of all, especially if you are in, assuming that this is a small company, and I think it is that right? Okay, I'm not facilitating, John's doing that for us, but for small companies, one of the best things to do is to look at companies who are a little bit bigger than you in non-competing industries. So, you know, for example, look at some of the companies in your space and see what they've done that you like and what you dislike. And then look at your competitors and see what you can do differently from them. And that will give you some ideas of colors that you can and can't use, and also fonts that you can and can't use, and some graphic elements that you can and can't use.
Or shouldn't use.
Or shouldn't use, yeah. I guess I should say that. You can do anything, but you know, there are good reasons to avoid things that look too much like your competitors.
Yeah, you don't want to be able to change logos or change the names and have it no look any different.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, you want to have some hardline do's and do nots before you talk with a graphic artist. And then there's several different options for graphic artists. Of course, you know, there's us. We work with a whole bunch of graphic artists, and we generally try to find an artist that's going to work for each individual client based on their preferences and their situation. There is a thing called 99 Designs that I like a lot, and this is if you don't have the resources to work with an individual artist or with a marketing company. And what 99 Designs does is you put in your parameters and they will come up with different solutions for you. And for some of our customers that don't necessarily want to go through the whole design process, we'll just facilitate their experience with 99 Designs and help them fill out that, you know, the basics of the requirements for their brand. And then these artists will bid on that and come up with some designs. You can select the ones that you like, select some finalists, ask for refinements, you know, do other kinds of things. And that's a really nice way to see a whole bunch of options and decide on something that works really well for you.
Good.
Cool. Anything else?
Not on this topic.
Okay, cool. This is a good group. I like this. This is fun when we have lots of people who do more than just sit there. We know it's a lot more fun when people are doing that. Okay, so now let's talk about verbal elements. And this is something that is just as powerful, and I would bet you anything that your competitors are not even thinking about this, right? Most people aren't. So taglines and slogans, names of your products and components, and ways of explaining key concepts. So, you know, if you're fuzzy about this, you're not going to have as powerful of a brand because you're going to have an inconsistent message. So ABCI, every single time, every single podcast you listen to, you know, ABCI's mission is
to help everybody out there sell more products and services in the aviation world.
To help aviation companies sell their products and services. Yeah, absolutely. That is very consistent, and we say it every time. Sapphire Aviation Solutions, just went through some work with them. Aircraft purchase and project management services you can trust. That's a big deal in their industry is trust. So we wanted to include that and make sure that it's really clear what they do and what is different about them. SSC, the Special Services Corporation, we want to be your flight department. That includes supplemental lift, that includes charter, that includes their FBO, you know, the whole 9 yards of what they do. So, you know, you want to think about that and use it everywhere. You know, you can use it in your signature line on your emails, you want to use it on your website, your business cards, your stationery, everywhere that you can, so that it's really clear to people what you do, because it may not be from your name, right?
That's true.
Okay, cool. Names of products and services. Here are some that we really like. Pilot e-logbook and the CFI dashboard. Those are two components of products by Pilot Partner, one of our favorite customers. Actually, they're all our favorite customers, right?
Of course.
Of course. Specializing in FAA certifications. That's Delta Engineering. You know, they're actually an ODM, and they have a lot more technical things that they say, but this is something that anybody can understand, whether or not they're have an even passing familiarity with the aviation industry. They know what FAA certifications are.
I think you misspeak. They're an ODA.
ODA, excuse me. They've got more acronyms than you can shake a stick at. The flight level signature wing desk. We've actually been working on that a little bit. It is a beautiful piece of furniture from Flight Level Furnishings, and Randy, I think, is in the room, so I'm sure he's going to correct me if we got any of that wrong. But you know, it's really important that we get that name right, and I actually really like that name. I think we've thought about that a little bit. Aviation Marketing Insider Circle. That's one of our products, and we like that name a lot because it really describes what it is. It's the people that are our clients. We call them insiders. ABCI's famous checklist service. We do that on just about every product that we have has a checklist. Aircraft Digital Logbook, that's a vlog. Airline Career Mentor, that's Airline Pilot Gateway, right?
Yep.
Okay. Ways of explaining key concepts, and this goes beyond component names or product names. So read hundreds of TAFs in seconds. That's WX24 Pilot, their app. One of the things that they do that makes it really clear what they do, read hundreds of TAFs in seconds. Pilots understand that, and that's their core audience. We bring traditional planning, discipline, and checklists of aviation to marketing. That's what we do. Dry leasing an aircraft is kind of like leasing a car. Caveat, caveat, caveat. So, you know, basically you're taking something and you're using a metaphor or a way of explaining it that people are going to understand, that your target market is going to recognize. So that last one is from Dallas Jet, and a lot of their customers have never leased an aircraft before, but they leased a car, so they understand that concept. And dry leasing sounds kind of funny to them, so, you know, explaining how that works using a metaphor and something that they understand makes more sense, right?
Yes.
Okay. Here's another thing that everybody on the call, I think, can do. Are your customers, clients, members, guests, or in our case, insiders? What do you call them? And depending on what you call them, it kind of changes the feeling, right?
And it should be the same all the time.
And it should be the same all the time, exactly. And each of those has, you know, kind of a different connotation of what that means and what you do for them, right?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. So customer service elements. There's, of course, your product or service design. You want to design that for your specific customers and make sure that that matches. Telephone standards. When people call your office, do they get a machine? Do they get somebody who sounds like they're at home? You know, I mean, all of those things can really ruin the effect if you're going for a high-end customer experience and all of your branding is very, very high-end, and then all of a sudden they hit a phone tree. That doesn't sound very high-end, does it?
That or nothing answers the telephone, not even a robot.
Yeah, it goes to voicemail. That's bad.
Or not even the voicemail.
Right.
In some cases.
Yeah, that's true, having a malfunctioning phone system. Your sales process, you know, is it quick and simple, or is it, you know, longer and drawn out? Do you send materials at some point in the process? You know, are you expecting it to take days, weeks, months, or years for them to make a purchase? And that really depends a lot on the number of people involved in the process and, you know, the size of the transaction and everything else. But, you know, if you buy a Mercedes, it's a very different process than buying a Honda, you know? How do you want your sales process to work? Have you thought about that choreography? Novelties and promotional items. When you bought the Skyhawk, you got a really nice, probably the nicest keyring I've ever seen in my life. I bet if we bought a Gulfstream, we'd probably get an even nicer keyring.
Yes, we would, among many other things.
Right, if it's even a keyring at all. Dress code for your team members. You know, everybody's been going really casual lately. Does that fit with the other brand decisions that you're making? You want to think about that. The decor of your facility. Now, if you go into a Qatar Aviation FBO, it's going to be kind of a high-end casual Southwest design, right? Mm-hmm. With leather couches and the, you know, the Southwest rugs and, you know, all of that. It seems very comfortable and very nice. And if you go to an Atlantic FBO in New York, it's going to have a very different feel to it. Be a lot more modern and still very high end and, you know, cater to a slightly different audience. So the decor of your facility, if people come see you, you know, you want that to match the rest of the branding, because once again, you get into that cognitive dissonance. Something doesn't look right. You know, they get on a go-to meeting with you and you're in a t-shirt and jeans and you're selling something that's very high end. You know, that cognitive dissonance is going to click in and they're not going to understand exactly why they suddenly don't trust you. They wouldn't tell you that, but, you know, it's one of those things that is going to work against you rather than for you, right?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Questions about verbal elements and customer service elements and how they fit into your brand.
So we have some employees. How do we get them to use consistent product names, etc.?
Okay.
Training.
Yeah, training is something that people used to do a lot, and people in large companies do a lot, and people in smaller companies tend not to do. I think it is very much worth it to create, even, you know, include some of these things in your branding manual or your branding design brief. If you complete this document and you put it in front of every single one of your customers and you do a 1-hour training that's similar to what we just did today, with all of your employees, and talk about the decisions that you've made and why you think they're important, and let them discuss them with you and talk about them and say, well, what about this? And how about that? And maybe even let them participate, especially if you're just putting this together for the first time. They're going to feel a lot more bought into it, and they're going to understand why this is important. And you tell them about cognitive dissonance, and you tell them about the difficulty in making sales, you know, all of those things. If they get it, they'll do it. If they don't get it, they won't, you know.
So is there a best practice, excuse me, best practices for the telephone, that is handling incoming calls, etc.?
Okay. I am going to say that for anybody in the aviation industry, unless you're selling like an automated app or something like that, or something that's fairly turnkey and low maintenance, you probably want a live human being to answer the phone. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the phone trees are death.
As a matter of fact, I on a very large company, they asked me to do one of these surveys at the end of a call, and I just really went blank because I couldn't get out of their phone tree, and I needed to ask a real person a question.
Right, and even if that person is not necessarily the person that can answer a question or solve a problem, there is something very reassuring about having a human being on the other end of the phone saying, let me find an answer and get back to you. So, you know, if you can teach everybody in your company to pick up the phone and say, let me find an answer and get back to you, if that's all you teach them, and then actually make them do it, you know, that's ideal. You know, other than that, I would say, you know, return calls within 1 business day at least. You know, for charter services or maintenance, is going to be faster than that. You know, if somebody has an airplane on the ground broken, you're going to have a priority of hair on fire, fix it now kind of thing. But, you know, you do want to be some degree of urgency that you're communicating to your customer, that how special they are, and, you know, how much you appreciate them doing business with you, and how much you appreciate their phone call just by having a live human being on the phone, right?
Yes.
Okay. That it?
So far.
So far. Excellent. Okay, so checklist. You want to complete or enforce your branding brief for your company, right? Okay. And that's all there is on the checklist. So if you go through that branding brief and make your notes and do your thing, that will be really, really helpful. So that is pretty much the basics of the webinar today. We do have an offer for anyone who is not currently a member that we'd like to go through the details of. And if you are somebody who has an interest in your brand and has an interest in making things better, you may want to think about this. If you already are a customer, then you know, you're welcome to stick around, and we'll go through some other things, and we'll also answer questions at the end. If you have questions that we haven't answered yet, we'll answer those until we run out. So hopefully that won't take us too long. Okay, so This is not for everyone. This is for people who are in sales and or marketing in the aviation industry, who are short on time and have enough experience to know what they don't know, right? Also, people who are open to sharing with other members, either as a panelist in a session like this, as a networker, as a refer of business when it makes sense. Those are the kind of people that we really like having as insiders, and all of our customers are insiders, whether they're buying our content marketing or social media or SEO or are just in our insider circle. So this offer is for you if you sell something in aviation and if you understand that marketing is not magic, right? So we built the insider circle for people who understand that success is about what you know and who you know. Like we had talked about before, getting our first customer was very, very difficult and also very instrumental in making things better for us, right?
Yes.
Okay. This will actually help you save your time, your money, and your reputation, help you focus on what's relevant. You want to make sure that you don't reinvent hot water. If someone else is already doing something in the aviation industry or has solved a problem, we like to learn from one another. This includes office hours, 1 hour a month, where we sit with you and you go through some of your problems, like maybe talking about a branding refresh is a great use of an office hour, or rehearsing a sales call with you or one of your salespeople to make sure that you feel comfortable. John makes a really good skeptical customer, and you know, can bring up all the objections that someone's likely to do, and make sure that you get that. Projects. This is where we keep all of your recorded meetings with us, your objectives. We you know, check against those every month, make sure that we're being your accountability partner. Destinations. This is our done-for-you services. Those are available through our insider circle. We have a book club. We read one sales or marketing book a month and talk about it with the group. Anybody who's interested can show up, and we record this for our podcast and make those available, because a lot of the sales and marketing books on the market have some really good ideas and some really bad ideas that are not applicable to aviation, right?
Exactly.
So, you know, we hope that you would join us for our book club, but that is optional as well. We have a briefing room where we keep all of our webinars like this one as recordings. So if you ever wanted to know about branding 6 months from now and you've forgotten everything we've said, you can go back and pull that up from the briefing room and go through it again. We have live events like our storytelling summit in Sundance, and that is actually coming up on pretty much our deadline for that. But basically, we're getting together in Sundance, Utah, which is Robert Redford's spiritual home of the Sundance Film Festival, right?
You bet.
There is no better place to learn storytelling than Sundance, Utah. So it's beautiful, and we're going to do some horseback riding and spend some time together and work on storytelling skills. So, and you know, one of the things we're going to do at that event is record a 2-minute video of you telling the story of your company or your product or your service, and you know, make sure that we get that polished and down, and you know, to where you're comfortable telling that story, and you're a very influential and powerful storyteller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the Insider Circle is risk-free. We have a 30-day money-back guarantee, and you know, no long-term contract. So if it's not for you, you lose nothing. And this is a very nice note from Gene, another broker. You know, that it's worth every penny. I thought that was really nice of him to say, especially being a very business-like person. So that works out really well. Another thing that you get is $347 in free advertising every month. We include you in our directories, and we also give you an opportunity to participate in our, like I said, our book club. We do pitches at the end of the book club. You get a 15 to 30 second pitch of your product or service that gets broadcast to a couple thousand people that listen to our podcast. So that's a pretty nice opportunity every month. So, questions about anything, about branding or about our Insider Circle or about anything else?
You may have answered this already, but one that came in, is this whole branding brief really necessary for a small company?
Okay. I hear somebody who is very busy and reluctant to do more work, and I totally understand that. I would say you're going to want to go through the whole branding brief, and there may be some sections that you can't or don't want to do at this point, and that's perfectly fine. So, for some companies, some bits and pieces of this may be out of reach, or that you don't want to spend the time or money on. The more you do, the better. So this is how a small company looks like a larger one, and this is how you start getting those benefits, like when people recognize who you are. For me, my hardest thing is picking up the phone and making a sale, right? Or calling somebody that doesn't know me. But if they tell me, yeah, I know who you are, I've listened to your podcast, or I've seen your advertising, that really helps me feel more comfortable with them on the phone, and helps me get those benefits of being able to make a sale more easily, because I already have some credibility with that person. Other questions?
What is the most important thing to do first?
The most important thing to do first, I would say probably your logo. That's not the only thing you need to do, but that is kind of a starting place, and that also is going to inform a lot of other decisions that you make about colors and fonts and everything else. And if all you have is a logo, you can get started acquiring a reputation that's associated with that logo, and that's visual shorthand for the relationships people have with you.
Cool.
Cool.
So how much is the event at Sundance?
The event at Sundance is... How much is the event at Sundance?
I don't recall.
I believe it is $47.99. We do have a couple of different payment plans where you can, I think it's $49.99 actually. It's on our website. If you go to aviationbusinessconsultants.com/Sundance, there is a sheet there that has all of the details with the itinerary and the cost, and also with the options. We've got a couple of different options for splitting that into 2 or 3 payments. So that's really helpful. It is less than $5,000, which actually is a really good deal, because most people will charge you $5,000 just to do the video, right?
True.
Yeah. Anything else?
What are the best aviation venues to engage new connections that can help endorse your product or service?
Okay, some of the best venues. I think traditionally in the aviation industry, trade shows are huge. Trade shows and association meetings. Also, so like NBAA is probably the best known and the best reputation for holding events that are really reputable and things like that, and it's a great place to meet people. One thing that we did early on is we started doing a education session in the NBAA conventions, and that brought us a number of benefits. Number one, we were seen as credible, in the aviation industry, because NBAA thought we were credible enough to spend an hour of people's time. It also gave us a captive audience for an hour. Before we even got to that point, we started going to those events and meeting people. Then they know we're in the industry. It gives you some credibility just even being in the room there. We had a booth, early on. It turned out to be more expensive than it was worth. I think we got more credibility out of going to those education sessions and other kinds of things, and shaking hands and meeting people and listening to their stories and telling things and stuff like that. So
regardless, it's a slow process.
It is a slow process. Social media is also a really good way of doing that, and building credibility. It's also a slow process, like any relationship building. Aviation people are very conservative and also very cliquey. So it does take a long time. Social media, there's a lot of groups on LinkedIn for different aviation interests and things like that. you look on Twitter using the hashtag AvGeek, there's a lot of people that will connect with you just because of using those terms, and will start to follow what you do and maybe share some of your stories and other kinds of things, or share some of your tweets and some of your pictures and things like that with their friends. So, getting into some of those groups is a slow process, but social media does speed it up quite a bit. So I would say events number 1, social media number 2. Magazines is another big one, right? You get mentioned in Aviation eBrief, Aviation Pros, AIN.
But does that mean mentioned as in PR or advertising in?
Okay, both will add to your credibility. Advertising can be expensive. We really prefer to do, what we call PR or press releases that get you mentioned in some of those magazines, because that scene is a little bit more credible. It's editorial content. People read about it. If it's an interesting story, then they become interested, and they also share those stories with each other. So, that's a wonderful thing. That's also something, if you get mentioned in a magazine, you're going to want to mention that on your social media, and you're going to want to mention that if you have a public speaking gig or anything else. You're going to want to have on a slide, as seen in all these magazines. So that's a wonderful way to build credibility too.
Well, we're 6 minutes late and run out of questions.
Okay, cool. So we won't take any more. If you do have questions after we've turned this off, which does sometimes happen, you can send those by email, ask us in your office hours, or let us know on social media. So we're always happy to hear from you. And thank you so much for spending the time with us. And hopefully you'll get some really good use out of that design brief, and you'll look 1,000 times more polished a month from now, right?
You bet.
Okay. Have a great afternoon, and we'll talk to you soon.
See ya. Ciao.